Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild show. Tabletop Gaming Guild is all about the memories and experiences that playing board games with friends and family can create. On this episode, we're going to talk about intellectual properties and IPs in games. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we've been playing. And to kick this off, we're going to start with Peter.
Oh, why are we going to start with me? Okay, fine. What have I been playing lately? So I've played 2 games lately. I got a chance to play Reavers of Midgard, and I got to play that with some of the guys here on the channel. And I did not lose as terribly as I expected I would, but I did lose. I don't want to, make anybody think anything different. I did lose, but it was a relatively close game. I think we were like within 10 points of one another, somewhere in there. But it is so it's like I'm just gonna try to I know Nathan or Evan or somebody would be able to explain a little bit better, but it's a little bit of a worker placement game, but you're choosing one action per round. And when you choose your action, then the other people get to decide whether they want to follow up, do the same action that you just did, or rest. And if you rest, you get some benefits from that as well. Resting didn't seem to happen a whole lot in this game. Most people will go ahead and follow up as long as they've got the prerequisite items to help them complete the action that is being done. But it's you're playing as Vikings, and you're going around and doing a bunch of different things, either attacking villages or you're attacking ships, or you're trading goods. And obviously, like most games, you're going around and doing these actions, gaining points. Most points wins at the end of the game. The theme on this one I thought was pretty strong. I liked it. I felt like it really leaned into the Viking theme well, while still leaning and feeling very Eurocentric. I enjoyed I think probably my favorite of the different things that you could do. I enjoyed the ship attacking action. I thought that was well done, where you had these 3 different ships with different items that you needed to have in order to attack them. And then there was still the luck of rolling the dice whether or not you were going to accomplish the action. So you might spend the goods but fail in accomplishing your mission. Most of the different actions, it didn't feel like there's a huge possibility of failing other than that one. So I kind of liked that one for that difference. The other ones, it felt like you more than likely you already knew if you had the stuff you needed to accomplish the action or not. So played that, really enjoyed it. Definitely one that I want to play again sometime soon. As everybody here knows, I enjoy me some Vikings. So I definitely felt like it was a strong theme and well built game. I know that this is it's a kind of not a spin-off, but it's tangential to the Champions of Midgard game.
It's like a second edition's reimagining of Champions of Midgard.
Okay.
And so they built it as a sequel to.
Okay. So I've never played Champions of Midgard. I would like to take a chance to play that at some point as well. The other game that I played yesterday. I played Isle of Skye from Chieftain to King. I had played that once before a couple of years ago. And so this was only the second time I've ever played it. Tile laying game where you have differing scoring mechanics, and in each round, one of those or 2 of those or 3 of those mechanics are happening all at once. And so you're trying to lay your tiles in a way to build towards those scoring mechanisms. So it feels a little Carcassonne-y, but definitely more. And I know that this is Alexander Fisher game. So I know Dan is probably a fan of this one. But I have not played it with Dan or any of the other guys here. I played it with a friend of mine who lives down in West Virginia. And so, yeah, I really enjoy it. For him, it's one of his top 10 games. He absolutely loves it. He loves tile laying games. And so playing a game with somebody who loves it always adds, I feel like, a benefit. So even if it's not my specific favorite style of game, I get that little bit of his love pouring over on it. And so I enjoyed that quite a bit. Plus, it's nice because he loves it and I beat him. So that's always a nice benefit. But yeah,
By
so
one point.
Isle of Scala and Reaver's Midgard. No, this time I beat him, I think around like maybe 16.
Ooh.
But the very first time I played 2 years ago, I played against him as well, and I did beat him by 1 point.
It figures.
It
Yeah.
figures.
Watch out, James. He's getting better.
Now,
So-
Alice Guy had a bidding mechanism for getting the tiles, right? Or
There is. So there's
Okay.
yeah. So you pull the tiles, everybody pulls 3 tiles, and then behind your screen, you choose one of those tiles that's just going to get discarded. Then the other 2, you put how much you're willing to pay for it.
Okay, yeah.
But the other person then gets a chance to pay that cost to take one of those tiles from you. You also get to do the same to them. And that was probably where I felt the most unsure of myself, having only played it once before and it been a couple years ago. So it's a little bit of a weird mechanic, because if they don't take the tile that you put out there, then you end up still paying the cost. But if they do buy it, then you get their money. And that helps you with further bidding later in the game. So I liked it. I liked it a lot. It had a nice catch-up mechanic with the person who's behind gets more coins during the income phase. And that's later in like the second half of the game that starts to take place. And plus, I like that the farther into the game you get, the more scoring mechanisms are happening in each round. So the first couple rounds is just one mechanism, and then the second, the third and fourth, there's 2 mechanisms, and the fifth and sixth, there's 3 mechanisms all happening all at once. And so you just have to be thinking ahead, as you can see when those things are going to be coming up. So a lot of fun. Really enjoy both of those games and would highly recommend them both to anyone. So that is me. I think next we're going to be going over to Evan.
So I had a couple games I played over the last week or 2 here, and I'm gonna just talk about 2. One being Reavers of Midgar. I got to play, and I was the one that was victorious in the last playthrough.
Boo.
I'm not going to talk too much more about it since Peter did a pretty good job explaining it. But it is a worker placement. It's like I said, it's billed as the sequel to Champions of Midgard, but I feel it's more of a spiritual, reimagining of it. I really like it a lot more than Champions of Midgard, which is saying something, since Champions of Midgard was in my top 10 in this last year. So it might be replaced. But I really like it for the fact that on your turn, you only have one action to do, and then everything else is figured out during everyone else's turn. So I just really like that interaction with the board and kind of having to watch what everyone else is doing so you can plan out, well, very likely they're going to do this, so I need to save the resources so I can come along to do this. And if I build up my board to get the extra actions when this happens to do more things, I really liked how it played out. The other game that I played recently was Mr. Jack Pocket. So got a game or 2 of that over the last 2 weeks. So with that, it's a detective game where you're trying to find Jack the Ripper. It's 9 tiles out onto the board, and they're all suspects of being Jack the Ripper, and you have 3 detectives on the outside, and you flip tokens to do various actions such as rotate tiles or move the detectives around. The idea being is you have to slowly narrow down who Jack is based off of what those detectives can see at the end of rounds. It is a very small game, very small box, and for such a small game, there is so much tension in that game. It is really good. Really enjoy that. Me and my wife have played it a couple times, and we both played on both ends of it and like it a lot.
That's one I would like to play eventually. I've played Mr. Jack quite a few times, but never played Mr. Jack Pocket, and would like to maybe see the differences that happen there. So
if I remember right, you have Champions of Midgard with everything, don't you?
I have everything with it.
I
sounds like
support you.
it sounds like you might not
replacing
want it anymore. Yeah.
They possibly might go somewhere. Maybe James seems very eager about that.
I can
Then
head
again,
over. Well, if
I
James
actually-
is eager, it's headed to my house, so I understand.
Yeah, pretty much. I actually like Champions of Midgard better than Reavers of Midgard, but I also like Agricola or Agricola better than Caverna or Feast for Odin, because I like games that are very punishing. And Champions of Midgard is a punishing game, especially if you don't have all the expansions where you can use those Valkyrie stuff.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. So Reavers is a much more tight game. Like they tightened a lot of it up, but they still give you many passive victory, much like Champions. Reavers is very forgiving though as you play it. Champions, you can flounder so badly so quickly. I think the biggest thing is because there's the multiple different resources to manage versus really with Reavers you only have one minus the die, and you can mitigate the die fairly easily with Reavers. Champions, you can't mitigate the die for anything.
You roll back, you are rolling bad and dead.
And I mean, you can get the re-rolls, but like I said, I mean, it is a resource that you have to have in that game.
Yeah.
It, like with Reavers, you can mitigate pretty much everything. So
and Reavers of Midgard has that wonderful thing where you're like, well, I can't do that action, but I'm going to do this action, but it's equally awesome. So everything you do feels like it's fun, and I like the follow mechanism. So you're invested in other people's turns. It might not be as awesome as the person that got to pick the spot, but it's still good. So if you still needed to do it, you still got something out of it. So
it's a great way to make it so you only have to do one thing on your turn, but still be committed into the entire game.
Yep. So, did you have any other ones?
No, those are the two I'm going to talk about.
So how about you, Dan?
All right, I'll mention two games as well. So recently we got to the table New Bedford. New Bedford's a game about shipping or whaling rather. This was one of the many games that James has handed to me at some point in time. We finally got this one to the table for its first play. In many ways, this is like a standard like worker placement game. You're putting out workers on a central board to collect resources. You're spending the resources to build buildings, which have like better resource generation and or victory points and or special powers. The one like cool thing that's in the game is the actual like whaling mechanic. So like you have to spend a worker to prepare your ship and then spend a different worker to like launch your ship basically. And when you launch your ship, how many resources you pay is how deep it goes on the whaling track, which is how many turns you get to collect the whale tokens blindly out of this bag, which of course are potentially worth points. When the boat finally returns to the port, you have an opportunity to basically pay money to keep these tokens as victory points or sell them off. Interestingly enough, if you sell them off for additional coin, all the other players in the game have the opportunity to purchase them for victory points if they've got the coin, which is like the most interesting thing in the game, basically. The other thing that we got to the table was a game called Tutor. Tutor was also one of the many games James has handed to me at some point in time. This is a game that is it's themed like court intrigue. You're like in the court of Henry the Seventh, I think it is. The guy who had 5 wives, that guy. And it's basically like it's also a worker placement game, except when you place your courtesans, I don't know what they call their workers, they sort of like file into these rooms where they could take their actions. And then like you use your leader to indicate what rooms are active, which can be interesting. Because we played it 2-player and there were like, I think there's 3 rooms. So every turn there's a room that's not getting used in one way, shape, or form. But those 2 leader placements might net me like 2 actions, 3 actions, or 4 actions, depending upon how many meeples I have in the room, the other kind of worker. And then most of the game is about moving meeples from your supply onto this big like courtroom board where you're stealing these tokens from the board that are of course are worth something. Depends on what exactly what they are worth, varies from game to game. But like, you know, the meeples can go up these room spaces and get into like court positions, which were worth victory points in our play. So it was an interesting like play of like acquiring the cards to move forward a lot, or using there are these like rings that allow you to move like a little bit and also unlock some special bonuses to the actions that are on the board. If there's one thing that I'm interested in this game, it is built-in variability, actually, because like we played the introductory game, the recommended setup, and which involves like a green card that tells you how to score points and like a red card that tells you something else. I don't even remember what, but like there's 4 or 5 different red and green cards. So obviously there's some kind of mashup that you can do with them. So we want to get back to this one to try a different mashup and see how different the game experience will be. I expect it to not be too different, but a little different, I guess.
I do think the game had a good bit of replayability in it, so I can agree with that. But yeah. All right. So Nathan, what have you been playing?
So I haven't
Monopoly,
really been
the Monopoly edition.
no. We might be talking about that later, but I haven't played too many in-person games lately. I haven't had access to my game group, but I have played a few games with the crew here. They talked about Reavers already. They have not talked about Arc Nova. Arc Nova is a really nice mid to heavyweight tactical game. There's a lot of like level blah blah blah. Sorry. What's the word I'm looking for?
I've never really heard of that in the game. I am sad that I missed out on that Arc Nova playthrough, because I hear that it replaces Terraforming Mars for a lot of people. So I love Terraforming Mars, and I played so much of it that I'm interested to see if that's true, because they do seem like different games.
In many ways, it's comparable. The biggest comparison is it's tactical over strategy, because there's so many cards in the game, and you're supposed to build combos, but you can't plan hoping to get a specific card, because chances are you're not going to get it. You have to look at the cards you have, look at the cards you've already played, and evaluate the value of the cards you've drawn, and use that to build combos from your existing cards. And there's a lot of tracks is a word I was trying to find the guard. So looking for it. So if you like games with a lot of tracks that are heavier weight, this is a great game. It's actually pretty clean, and there's a lot of rules, but they're actually relatively easy to learn. Once you start playing it, it goes pretty quick. You pick it up almost immediately. And I love the scoring at the end. It's such a clean scoring mechanism. You can just glance at the board and know who's won.
Yeah, it's something that I think you would like a lot, James, because the game can be very punishing as you go. I think because we recorded the playthrough and it hasn't gone up yet, I don't believe. But I think I said it at the end. It plays really well, but it's definitely a game that it is very unforgiving your first time, because you're just kind of going in and you're going to probably lose very badly as you're kind of learning how the system works, and you're learning the combos and trying to learn the cards as you go, which is the only detractor I have to that game. Like, it is fantastic. I think it absolutely replaces Terraforming Mars for me. It's very good. I would absolutely play it again, even though I got absolutely demolished. I think that's the biggest downfall to it, is since it has that you need to play it more than once to get a really good feel for the game, that can take away to some people. Like, it's that hard step to get into it.
Yeah, and a good portion, like almost half of the video playthrough video, is the teach.
Yeah.
So like I'm pretty sure it's like pushing 45 minutes.
It is
So-
definitely a little bit of a teach, but as I said, it's like once you start playing it, okay, everything clicks.
Oh yeah, it moves through. You just got to learn the symbols on the stuff, and then the cards are so clean to play.
Okay. So the iconography works once you get the hang of it. Okay.
The other big thing about this game is there is a very, very minor take that element, but it's not enough that it's really going to do any real damage. If you don't do well in this game, it is generally something you didn't plan out well. You didn't use this card that you should have. That you didn't realize, okay, how valuable that card was. So it's not that somebody's knocked you down too much. It's you got to learn the game a little better.
Except this time when Nathan, did bad things to me, and it was completely his fault I lost.
Wait, did you lose? You won, I think. Well,
No,
you have to
not
watch the video
Mark
to find out. Apparently, I have to watch the video to find out.
So that's not all the games you played though, right?
I have been playing Oathsworn as well,
That's
but
what I want to hear about.
I did talk about that a little bit last episode, but I can
Oh, okay.
update you a little bit more. It's like Oathsworn is a really good, really solid RPG style game that comes in 2 chunks. So, and you can actually learn each segment separately. So you can learn how to do the story part of the game, where you're basically just traveling around town, exploring, talking to people, and interacting with the app to find out, okay, how much progress you made in the mission, who you talked to, if you got allies and whatnot. And you can't really fail that part, so that it does reduce the tension a little bit there. So, because at worst, like if you get into combat in the story mode, at worst, you still succeed, but you take a damage. But where it gets really cool is when it transitions to the encounter, which is the second half of the game. First thing you have to do is you go into this big box of ridiculous minis and pull out the secret box and find out what this big monster looks like. And then you have to set up the encounter, and each encounter is going to be different. And there's 21 different encounters in this game. So there's a lot of content here and a lot of minis. And it's, I think I got like 6 boxes, and I'm going to be doing unboxing videos, and I'll do spoiler videos for like each chapter. So there'll be a lot of Oathsworn content coming out on this channel.
That's gonna be awesome. And you're gonna paint the entire thing, right?
No.
Oh,
I'd love to, but I don't have that much time. and the minis are, I think, above my skill as a first-time painter, because they have interchangeable components. So you can, if you equip a different weapon, you can actually swap out the arm of a mini to have the right weapon or helmet or shield or whatever not. But the other really cool thing about this game, and part of the reason I was interested in it, is because I'm getting more and more interested in RPGs, and it would be so easy to use these components for an RPG. I mean, I got a freaking town with it. I got like little huts and walls and trees, and it's so over the top, but it's so awesome.
so what RPG game are you gonna run next?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yes.
What version of Monopoly are you going to do?
I got to find a pretty rules light game. I mean, I wouldn't mind running Morkborg again. That was a lot of fun. Or if you guys can find another rules-like game like that, I'd be more than willing to learn and run
I
it.
could probably find a rules like, I guess, medieval style fantasy RPG.
Okay. I like dark.
Summer Room.
Yeah. Oh, that does sound really cool, but it doesn't sound like it's that rules-like.
Eh,
We'll play that eventually.
let's
Yep.
read it.
Dave's been promising to run that for a long time.
I lied, but I have. So, is that all the games you played?
Yeah.
All right. So I played a lot of games, but I'm only going to go over a couple of them. Well, what, 5 or 6 here? Mainly because I had to catch up from going on vacation. Well, it was a work vacation. Then I got COVID, and then my life ended for 2 weeks. That was awesome. As in not awesome. But I'm going to go over these real quick. The first one was one that Nathan sent for my daughter's birthday, and that was Dragomino. And I always appreciate well done kids games because kid games are really hard. They're either very lame and I don't feel like playing them, or they're too complicated for the child or children that are playing. Dragomino, I think, did a very good job. It's a very interesting game. It's similar to King Domino, where you're going to have a selection of tiles. In this case, you're only ever having 4 regardless of player count. So it's super easy. You just flip over 4 tiles. You don't need to reduce them or change anything for player count. And all they're doing is they have a starter tile and they're going to put another tile in. If they match a terrain when they place it down, they get a dragon egg that matches the terrain type. They flip the dragon egg over. If it's a dragon, they get a point at the end of the game. If it's a shell, they get the queen dragon. And what that does is the next time that you flip over 4 more tiles for everyone to pick, the person with the queen dragon picks first. And at the end of the game, all you do is you count up how many dragons you have, including the queen dragon, whoever has that, and the person with the most dragons wins. Super simple game. Other things that I appreciate about it is they did limit the number of tiles, so the game plays very quickly, which is great for kids with low attention spans or just kids in general. So the game itself takes about like 10 minutes to play. Really good. One of my favorite kids games, and we've played it probably over a dozen times already. I can look it up and tell you, but we've played it a lot, and they ask for it like nightly. So awesome game, highly recommend it. And that is Dragomino. Another game that was really hard for me to learn for some reason, but is not a hard game to learn, is Viticulture World. I've played a lot of Viticulture. Viticulture is one of my top 10 favorite worker placement games and one of my top 20 games. I love it. It's a competitive worker placement game. I love all the different decisions you have to make throughout the game, and it's a well-made game with a lot of meaningful, good expansions that just makes the game even better so it doesn't dilute the game. So when I got a expansion to review, which is changing competitive viticulture into a cooperative game, okay. So I think it took me a little bit to get my head wrapped around what was happening, but the game is pretty simple. You get a new board and you get tons of components, and it does it well. It is a functional cooperative game with very good solo mode, amazing solo mode. And it's cooperative in a way that doesn't lead to quarterbacking either. You have multiple things that you have to do in the game. One is you yourself as a player have to get 25 points, period. Everyone has to have 25 points by the end of the game. You as a team have to get 10 influence in addition. So where you're cooperating a lot is getting those influence points. And you're basically using your own strategy to figure out how to get 25 points. Throughout the game, some of the changes are you can trade. So if you put your grande worker down, where you put your grande worker down, whoever's there, you can trade with them. Now, typically what you're going to trade is cards. So you might have some of the orders you can't fulfill because you didn't do that. So you might like, here, you can do this. You have this order, you'll get your points and have fun. Also, instead of 7 cards as being the maximum amount of cards that you can have in your hand, in Viticulture World, it's 5. So a lot of times you're drawing these cards. You don't want to necessarily lose some great cards that you have. So you might go do the trade just to give someone a card, because the trade works where you can trade one thing. You don't have to get anything back. They could give you something and you don't give them back, or you can give something to them and they can give something back to you, but it'll be one thing. It also has a unique limiter in the game where at the beginning of the game, you have 4 regular workers and they put hats on them now. So 2 of the workers can only be in the summer and 2 of the workers can only be in the fall. However, one of the best spaces on the board in the fall is you can upgrade a worker to remove its hat. And if you remove the hat in following years, which it goes up to 6 years, you can place that worker in fall or summer, your choice. So there's a lot more to the game. Review just went up today. It's a wonderful game, amazing game. If you have viticulture and you like viticulture, I highly recommend getting it. There's multiple different places of the world you can play with, and every single one of those is a completely different game. It sets it up differently. There's different goals. When the cards flip, you have different action spots. You have different goals that you have to meet through the game. It's amazing. There's so much replayability in the game. Turn something that didn't make any sense to me to something wonderful. All right, to speed up here, I also reviewed Herbaceous, which I thought was a really good game. That is a game where you have to strategically determine when you want to plot your plants, and you only have so many plants, or only so many plots you can do, and they have to have like different sets or different things going with them. And there's a communal pile, and it's just a push your luck thing. How far do you want to go with building up this communal pile in the middle, and you have your own private one, because you can pull from as many cards as you want from the communal pot before someone else pulls the trigger. But if you do it too early, you won't score as high in that pot that you just put those herbs under. So that's the crux of the game. That's pretty much it. It's a very fast game and fun. Last 3, Ven. Ven is a party game that I like, which is a mixture of Dixit and code names. In Ven, you have a Venn diagram. And in real time, you will have a giant stack of pictures, and one person is going to be flipping these pictures and putting them in different parts of the Venn diagram. Only one picture can be in both locations. The thing is, the teammates for that person have to guess the 3 words that are along the 12 on the side that this person is trying to make you guess. And the first team, because it goes over multiple rounds, once you call Venn, everyone has to guess. First team to get to 12 points wins. Simple, fun, pretty easy game. Liked it. Vanquishers, which is a 2-player TCG game, terrible card game, I think it is, where it's really fast and you play as a Zion, I think they call it, and you have to equip weapons and shoot each other. I think it's really nice because it's pretty straightforward and pretty fast. So I like that one. You'll see more coming for it. We're going to get more stuff for them to review. The last game I wanted to talk to Dan about to get his thoughts. And the last game I played was Tiny Epic Pirates. And I also played the expansion for Tiny Epic Pirates and the mini expansion for Tiny Epic Pirates. So Tiny Epic Pirates is a really cool game where you're going to be going through and you're trying to bury 3 treasures first, period. Unless you have the one expansion, and you have to bury it earned too. I love the base game of Tiny Epic Pirates. There was a lot of really cool stuff that you got to decide from. There's a lot of tactics that you needed to use in the game, and there's a lot of meaningful decisions you can make to make your goal to bury those 3 treasures. The expansions were fine. I really was hyped up about the curse of I'm a Duck. I'm just gonna call it I'm a Duck because that sounds what it sounds like. I wasn't too thrilled about the expansion, the Ghost expansion. It was fine. I'll play it. I just like the base game so much more without it. But I wanted to love it because I love the idea of that expansion, which you have like Pirates of the Caribbean style dead things all over the place, skeletons and ghosts and a dead ship. Awesome. Base game, amazing. What did you think, Dan?
Okay, so Titanic Pirates is in my collection. I've played it a couple times. I have not played it with any expansions whatsoever. So thanks for the tidbits of your ideas of what it looks like with the expansions. I also feel like this is actually a pretty good one. Like you have like this rondel mechanic that where you could get where you that you use in order to determine what your primary action is going to be for the turn. Your captain card can give you a bonus if you pick a certain action as your primary action, which means you sort of are incentivized to try to get those actions quicker. Every time you go one full circle around this rondel, you take you activate the merchant ships and the navy ship that's coming to hunt you, which is certainly a point of the game. This is a great mashup. It's got like pick up and deliver mechanics that are actually really solid. You can raid other players' ships. So this is necessary and important in any pirate-based game, I feel. The navy ship is just there as an obstacle. There's like no way you can beat it. The one piece of the game that I felt was not quite thought out well was you sort of have an XP chart somewhere on your personal player board where you can level up, and that increases like your base speed. I think is one of the upgrades you can have there, and like halfway up on the level chart, you get an extra like little meeple, which are important because this assigning these meeples determines like to sails, cannon, and hull. I think give you bonuses for that particular action. You can also use the little meeples on the rondel to skip over actions in case you want those bonuses. All cool stuff, but like the level up chart did not come into play a lot in our plays. That might have been just because we were only 2 players. But like we rarely got like the meeple bonus, which was halfway up that chart, and never maxed it out because there didn't seem to be a lot of those experience markers to be farmed, I guess, in the game. That is determined by like I think the merchant ships is what gives you those experience markers.
2 things. So the legendary track, the way you're going to get it is you have to successfully attack and defeat a merchant ship, or successfully be the attacker and defeat another player.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 ways that you can bring up the legendary track.
And like the weakest merchant ships, the ones that appear at the very beginning of the game, don't even award that. You have to get to them like mid-tier ships before they start buffing you on that chart.
That's actually true. It has to show the little icon for it. You will always get it if you take on another player.
Yeah.
And by taking out, you just jostle them.
Yeah.
But you get that legendary upgrade. The one that I like is getting the extra meeple, but then there's also a level where you get to roll 3 dices in combat instead of 2.
Yeah.
Then you become dangerous and everyone stays away from you. But I agree, it never really
it's something that's in the game, but it doesn't seem to have much impact to come into play as often as I feel like it should. I guess is my only complaint. Otherwise, the game is great.
I think if you played it 4-player, you would find that it happened more often. I don't know that it will happen enough for you to be comfortable with it or think it's great, but it would definitely happen more often with more players. The board's more crowded, so it's much easier just to punch someone while you're playing. But yeah, so I was interested in your thoughts on that. It's pirates. All right, so let's go ahead and get into IP in games, or intellectual properties. Just so everyone knows, basically an intellectual property is going to be something that has been published out there that is like a world or a concept on like a alternate reality, or think like Marvel or Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or Stranger Things, or just anything where it just developed its own fictitious world, basically, is going to be an intellectual property. So what we're going to talk about first is we're going to talk about where we think, because a lot of times there's a lot of intellectual properties applied to board games. A lot. That happens all the time. Like you could walk into Target, Walmart, and you got a wall of games that are based off of intellectual properties. So what we're going to start off with is if anyone has any examples of where they feel that they were most offended by an intellectual property being placed on a game. And I'm already going to start off the bat, and you can't say Monopoly, sorry, or Chutes and Ladders, or none of that stuff. Everyone knows that stuff's junk when you put it, you're just slapping something on it. So I'm going to throw Peter under the bus because he looks like he's scared. And let's see, Peter has an example of one where he didn't like how the intellectual property was applied to a game.
Yeah, I don't know if I have one. I mean, I have definitely played some games that have intellectual properties on them. I've definitely seen a ton. And I don't know that I can say that I've ever seen one and just been completely offended by it.
I don't have to be completely offended, where you
Well,
just think it was like they didn't really apply the intellectual property. It was just trying to sell a game.
Um,
Don't say Star Wars Carcassonne, because Star Wars Carcassonne is amazing.
no, I didn't even know that was the thing, honestly.
It is actually.
Okay. No, I mean, I like Carcassonne. I like Star Wars. Sure, throw that together and sell me on it. No, I don't know. I hate to bail out on this one, but I don't know that I've seen one and actually had a chance to read about it or play it and be like, this has nothing to do with the intellectual property at all. Because most of the ones that I've come in contact with and actually played, I have liked, or at least thought, yeah, that was fine. None that I walked away from and had a really bad taste in my mouth. There's actually some out there that I'm like, oh, I want to try that game. And I haven't had a chance yet, so I can talk about that in a little bit, but nothing for the offensive side.
All right, I'm going to throw one out here just to get you have something to have opinion on for it.
Sure.
And that's Lords of Waterdeep. Lords of Waterdeep is an amazing game, but it has really nothing actually at all to do with D&D other than art.
Right. Yeah, we've definitely talked about that before.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can understand what you're saying where, okay, so why did you put D&D on it? Because it doesn't really have anything to do with D&D. I would completely agree. They could have thrown any other theme on there and still made it work. It was in no way to me offensive though that they did D&D on it. I would be interested to see what other IP or non-IP they would have placed on that same game.
Yeah, that's the thing. It feels like it belongs, but they could have done like literally anything.
Yeah,
because the flavor text, I think, is where the design came in that made it work.
Right.
You got that really cool flavor text on it that relates to the words of the quest that you're trying to do or what the intrigue card is doing. So
yeah, but I completely understand what you're saying, that it could have just been anything and not D&D and still be a great game because it's a good game. But for me, it's all of a sudden you just made it better because you made it D&D.
Sure,
for me,
works. Yeah.
For me, because I like D&D, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you put an IP on it that I like and it's a good game. So sure.
Yeah.
So I guess
that's a fair, valid point.
Okay.
I just wanted to see what you thought. That was all.
Yeah.
All right. So
I can rescue Peter with a good example of a bad IP game.
Sure, go ahead.
So Star Trek Catan. This is a game where, you're gathering resources, some random metals, and
no, they're all elements from the Star Trek universe
Well, sure, but
that are all unreasonably the same-ish color.
yes, there's that, and they maybe got mentioned in the Star Trek that like once or twice. I don't know. I don't not really that invested in Star Trek to know that deep into the lore. But then you're also like you're building space stations and you're building fleets, which are fleets are just basically roads.
That's correct. They're just roads.
And none of it makes any sense. None of it says Star Wars. It's resource gathering
Star
and
Trek.
building. Star Trek, sorry. There's no exploration. There's no meeting new cultures. There's nothing Star Trek about this.
There's rolling dice to gain the lithium. Yeah, no, and it's so overproduced for like they're ship models, like they're ship models on stands that you place on there, and there's giant models for the space stations, which I think was Deep Space Nine space stations. Like it would be cool to use those pieces for any other game, and then everything is so close to the same color. It's like insane. The planets, the resources, like I don't know what they were thinking. I agree. That is a great pick of a horrible implementation of an IP.
Okay, you were just talking. I'm going to pull it back just a second. I've thought of one.
All right.
I've thought of one, and I still actually own it. It's just it's downstairs sitting on my shelf.
Sounds like something we get to burn.
Right? Terrible. So anybody, I was born in the 80s in school, elementary school in the 90s.
God, you're so young.
I know. Early computer games in the class, and my class, we played, I think it was fourth grade, we played Oregon Trail.
No, that game is so bad.
So
I
played that computer game, air quotes game.
The computer game's good.
Yeah, played it a whole bunch. And so all of us out there, it's all nostalgia. It's the nostalgia factor. And so they slapped Oregon Trail onto a semi-card game / board game that is horrendous. Tried playing it, I think at least twice, and walked away both times like, why? It's the only. In the game, if nobody played this game, you're reenacting the journey west on the Oregon Trail, and more than likely either your raft or your wagon or whatever at some point in time is going to sink in the water, or you're going to die of dysentery, which is the thing I think most people remember from playing that video game.
You're making it sound better than it is. Because literally, when you flip over these land tiles,
I'm talking about the video game right now.
The video game.
The video game. So the video game
so bad.
So they try to turn this into a card game, and like you said, you can flip over a card, and it's just like, and you die, and that's it, and you're out of the game.
And you have to make it through the entire deck, which is like 1 billion cards.
So it's cooperative. You're trying to work together to make your way through this game. And it's next to impossible with this
I will say
stupid card game. That's the one I'm going to throw out there for sure.
I will say that the only redeeming quality for that game
go for it.
Is the dry erase gravestones that they gave you with it.
So
you can write your own epitaph on there.
I would agree with you.
That's great.
That part was funny. That part was funny.
I'm slightly scared. You didn't get that game from me, right? I'm pretty sure I donated that one to like the Salvation Army.
No, this is a game. I think I ended up purchasing it specifically for me and my wife to check out, because we both had, again, I fell into the nostalgia of the idea.
It's a drop.
And it's terrible. It's absolutely awful.
Oh, people, I'm the same age as Peter, and I bought mine walking through Target.
Yep.
Like you saw
it.
You're
cheap.
like,
it was right there.
Ooh. And you go and then you play it, and you play it like 2-3 times. And you're like, who can I give this to?
Well, I'm not that mean. I'm a nicer person, because I'm 90% positive. This is when I was purging stuff and pulling stuff out and donating stuff to the library. And
you just threw it in the trash.
I actually donated it to one of the like Salvation Army or Goodwill, because someone else would be a sucker and buy it for them. for a
There you
dollar.
go. There you go.
And so I'm not that nice, but I'm not.
Oh man. Yeah. So that's my one that I can definitely think of.
All right, that's a good one too.
Everything I've heard about this game makes it sound like what you said is right. And the new they should have changed the title of this game to just "And You Died."
It's not even a game. Like I can't. It's just an act. You have no control over the game whatsoever. None. It's
And it has an expansion.
Get an expansion too. That's because all these suckers bought it too. They're like, this is cool. I remember this game. And then another company actually came out with the same name game, Oregon Trail, which was a board game version of the same thing. And I don't think it sold very well, probably because the card game bombed. And I didn't play that one because I didn't like the card game. So Evan, do you have an example?
So coming back to one of your earlier points, and I feel like I'm going to talk about this later, where you said, we're not going to talk about like Monopoly or any of those. I actually want to talk about that later on, because putting IP on some of that stuff, I think actually is beneficial. But like I said, we'll talk about that later. But talking about IP on a game that was absolutely terrible, and it's going to be an IP that I'm going to talk about on good implementation too, and that's going to be talking about Harry Potter. My wife, kids love Harry Potter, as do I, but there is one game that is sitting in my oldest son's collection, and I was looking at it. Harry Potter Potion Challenge game. It is probably one of the worst games I have ever played. But my oldest may have a hoarding complex and doesn't like to get rid of anything, so it's still sitting there.
I wonder where he got that from.
For me, no kidding.
It's James' fault. So in the game, you're in potions class, and you have to wander around the grounds of Hogwarts collecting various components, and then you have to bring it back to the start once you get it all. Filch is walking around and can make you lose materials that you gathered, or just come straight up block your path, and you can wander all over the different place. The downside to the game is when you go through and collect your materials, they're printed onto the board and they're covered with like this like special ink that they put on there, and you have a wand that has this thing on it that you put over it, and it's going to tell you what material you picked up. It is next to impossible to see through that and see what you got. Like, I have done it every way possible, shining lights on it, getting up within like an inch or two from it. You cannot see what is actually printed on the board. It makes it literally impossible to play. And they could have done that game a million different ways. They did it the absolute cheapest way possible, made the game completely unplayable, but because we put the Harry Potter brand on it, it probably sold quite a bit more than it honestly should have been allowed by some kind of Geneva Convention.
That is a strong hate.
Don't even get me started on Star Wars stuff.
Oh yeah, that's low-hanging fruit. All right, Dan, do you have an example?
The best. All right, folks, I'm going to tell you a story, and I have nothing wrong with this particular IP. I have everything wrong with this particular implementation, however. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Magic the Gathering currently has like a side hustle called Universes Beyond, where they
Don't take mine away. No,
where they introduce IPs from outside of their universe into the Magic Gathering universe. Some time ago, this was not the case. The very first time this happened, it was with a product called The Walking Dead Secret Lair Drop Series. So The Walking Dead Secret Lair Drop Series was a box. It contained 4 cards. The 4 cards were preset, so you knew exactly what you were getting. The cards were black bordered and therefore legal in like Legacy and Commander, but no other formats. and you could only get them through this secret lair. So the way the secret lair was marketed and sold to the public was you had to go to WotC or Hasbro's special ordering site and order it. The list price at the time was $50, right? And there was a very short order window. I believe it was like 6 or 7 days. And if you didn't order it, you never saw the cards. And it created a great uproar in the community because people were like, well, what if they're actually competitively playable in one of these two formats? And then like you need 4 copies of one of them or something. And like people were kind of like scared that Wizards was going to pump out cards through this very narrow, restricted channel. They did eventually reprint those cards with different names. But like at the time, it was a great uproar in the Magic the Gathering community. So I thought I'd toss that out there as a piece of information to educate the public about this was generally thought of being mishandled at the time. I agree with this assessment.
Yeah, I thought you were going to steal mine, but no. Yeah, I agree with that assessment too. I think that's super shady. You got lots of people that probably bought it just because they were scared that was going to happen. So, yeah, Magic the Gathering just printing money right now. They don't even care. They're like, hey, let's just pick an IP and print it, and people will buy it.
They're printing Monopoly now, so
their first generally available Universes Beyond product will release later this year. It is Warhammer 40K Commander decks.
I mean, what happened to the Magic the Gathering universe? They're just like, screw it. Let's just do other things. We like money. I'm waiting for the there's probably already one. I'm waiting for probably the My Little Pony one, just to be like, this is the end of Magic. There already is one.
I'm sorry. So they've previously done some Hasbro crossover cards. The difference was the Hasbro crossover cards were silver bordered and therefore were not legal in any format.
Yeah.
So like there actually is a Grimlock promo that's silver bordered and it's a flip card. So it transforms, right? And there was a My Little Pony card that they did as, I forget what the promotion behind that one was, but it exists. And then there was a sort of Dungeons and Dragons. There we go. Yeah, that was like a convention only release, if I remember that right.
Okay. Yeah. So just to go on the MTG hate train, although MTG is fine, it's great. It just I don't know. I don't like the direction they're going right now with this weird stuff. But I believe it was called Magic the Gathering Hero of Dominaria, which is a worker placement style game. And the IP didn't have anything to do with the game itself. It was a straight up worker placement game, and they just shoehorned things in. They had iconic Magic the Gathering art on the different cards, which was really nice. They didn't really work with what the art was based on what the Magic card was, based on what the card actually did in the game. They just applied art. They had weird stuff like you're trying to take out the Cabal. Okay, great, whatever. And it pops up everywhere. And you're making ley lines out with little so basically what you're doing in the game is you're connecting point A to point B to be able to pull more resources to you when you're at point A. That's the point of the game, and you use these resources to power up your board and give you different abilities that have nothing to do with Magic the Gathering. Just they were like, hey, we have a sort of semi-good worker placement game that we don't want to apparently work on anymore. What theme could we put on it to sell it? Is what it seemed like. So I know that's a little harsh, but I pretty much see that game in discount bins everywhere. So, there's got to be truth to that if no one's willing to pay the actual MSRP on the game, or even mildly close. But the art was good. The board looked like crap, but the art on the cards were great. They had miniatures. You could get painted miniatures with it. So they went overboard with it.
There was a premium version of the game where you got painted minis.
And they weren't painted very well. So I got the one with the painted miniatures for $10. So I got the premium guy for $10. So like, yeah, that says a lot. Another one that I was going to throw out real quick is a book series that I love, and I'm really, really looking for games that are going to be in that universe, and that's Stormlight Archive. I really, really love Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. I think that's an amazing book series, my favorite book series of all time. And Brotherwise Games has a Call to Adventure, which is a pretty simple game where you're just basically trying to complete a set of heroes. The hero's journey is all you're doing, is a set of cards. And when you complete that, the person with the most points from those cards is the winner. And they put Stormlight Archive on top of it. Is a special edition that you can get. I love the art and all the flavor text that have on the cards, but I didn't appreciate that they just basically slapped it over a card that was a game that was already done. It was just they already have Call to Adventure. It's a fantasy style game where you play Hero's Journey. You don't need to put Stormlight Archive on top of it. Nothing really even worked. It was just really cool art that I'm going to keep the game forever for, just the art on the cards. But that was it for me.
Before we go on, I do want to
Yeah.
talk about a flip of this.
Okay.
Games like Valeria system, where they have a game and try to make an IP out of the game. And Valeria is probably, in most cases, I think it fails, because, and Valeria's, I think, really failed in that by making this into an IP where they have all these different Valeria games, it just makes mass confusion. Nobody knows which game is which. So if you're looking for a specific one, you're probably going to end up buying the wrong one. You might not like it. It'll be a completely different game, unrelated to what you're trying to get. And it's just mass confusion. And it's a pretty well-known issue with this Valeria series.
I've actually tried a couple of these Valeria games, found more than one that I found capable, but I agree that like the names of the games are kind of too similar to each other, and they all use exactly the same art style, which I understand they wanted to do for like world building purposes, but it also makes it unclear exactly which game you're looking at if you're looking at a random photo of a Valeria game.
Yeah, I agree with that. One that I do think that the flip side worked for was Dead of Winter. Dead of Winter did create a great IP off of that series, where a game that really didn't have an IP. And they actually took it over like fan favorite characters in the game, and they have their own comic book series, and they do all sorts of stuff for it. So it can work. I mean, what was it? Faction Battlegrounds is working towards that too, creating a universe off of their game. It's just you just have to do a lot more.
Right.
A board game can't be a universe.
I think Tidal Blades is handling it pretty well. They're taking their time and like being very clear. Okay, this is the first game. This is like the comic book series off this book. Well, this is the art books, and they're releasing things, and it's very clear for now where the progression is.
So that's a pretty good transition into all the positive stuff that's going to be for the rest of the night. And that's going to be, what are your favorite examples of a board game where you think the IP was integrated into the game perfectly? You loved it so much because of the IP. It doesn't have to be perfectly integrated, but just a game that you love because of the IP being present. So going to throw Peter under the bus. Peter.
So I will break the mold a little bit and steer away from board game to game that's played on a tabletop.
No.
Yes, because we've played it on here with you guys. Alien the RPG is a role-playing game based on the Alien movie series that is phenomenal. Everything about this game, the fact that they chose to specifically, at least initially, focus on games that were what they call cinematic play, where everybody is like, the idea here is that you are going to be playing a role-playing game that is going to still play out like one of the Alien movies. And spoilers, everybody, pretty much everybody dies in the Alien movies, and they die in horrific ways. And so from the outset, they're telling you, okay, players, we're going to play a role-playing game, but be prepared for all of you to die in really gruesome ways. And that's part of the fun of the game. Like most role-playing games, you're still trying not to die. You want to be a hero or a villain or whatever, and you want to play in a campaign and you want to play forever and you want your character to become awesome. In Alien, this is not the case. You are playing a character who is going to make really probably silly decisions, or even what you think might be smart decisions, and still at some point you're going to come up against an alien / xenomorph, and you're going to have your throat ripped out, or eventually you're going to get infested with an alien and you're going to get a chest burster coming out your chest, or you're going to be James and you're going to hang on the outside of a ship forever and eventually freeze until one day you thaw out in some spaceport somewhere.
Android baby.
They're going to make it. So everything about the game, the fact that they leaned into the cinematic scenario where you're going to die, and then the mechanics of the game, the stress mechanics, as you just keep rolling dice, and it's just more and more like, even when you do something cool, you get to add more dice, but adding more dice also still gives you more chances to fail. And so every time you're rolling, you're like, holy crap, is this the last time I'm going to roll and everything's going to fall apart? And when it doesn't, cool, but when it finally does, so we finished that game, and players and myself, the games master, the tension was there the whole time. And that's what you get when you watch the movie. You're waiting for that jump, that scare jump. You're waiting for the alien to finally show itself. You're waiting for what's the next horrific death. And so the tension that you get from the films is definitely felt in every aspect of the game. And so it's one of the few IP role-playing games that I have played. I have others that I want to play that I think are going to probably do a really good job of integrating that IP. But this is the only one that I definitely have played. Other than I have played a Lord of the Rings one. But this one just knocks it out of the park, where it is a really great example of pulling what was in the film into the game and making you feel like you were in one of those movies.
Yeah, it's a big difference between spending like a year-long campaign to try to make an epic character, or just having one section and trying to have that epic moment.
Right, exactly.
So a lot more build up, a lot more excitement, super tense RPG. I agree. Great pick. We are Tabletop Gaming Guild, so we're not all board games.
That's right. I have to remind people every once in a while, it's not just board games.
I just, on a side note, I really want to play the One Ring, I think it's called.
Yes.
RPG by the same company, Free League Publishing. Different writer, I believe.
Yeah,
but
it looks really good. It's got a lot of interesting stuff to it. Can't wait to play it.
How about you, Evan?
So what I'm going to stay with the same IP, talk about the HP Harry Potter. One that really worked really, really well, I thought, is Hogwarts Battle. So it's a deck building game. You go through the multiple years of the school, and each year is, I don't want to say it, but like a section of the game. So you build your decks off of the things from the books and the movies, the spells and the items and stuff like that. And you defeat the bad people from those years of school. And it's not a super complicated game. It's a cooperative game, but the way that they implement the IP into it, very well done. Very well done. The game is pretty good. It's, not an overly super great game, but it's a really good game. And how they handled the IP for it was fantastic, because it just drips all over it that this is Harry Potter. This, if you like it and you want a non-complicated, cooperative game, this is for you. Got this also for my oldest son, and we've played it once or twice, I think, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, later on when you get through the game, so you have if you did the first 2 chapters and stuff. I think in the second chapter you level. I don't know. It might be the 3rd chapter until you level up the characters, but you actually get new cards for the characters. I mean, that happens repeatedly, so it's not really a spoiler. But that game is 100% where the theme and IP dictated the mechanics. I think that was great. It's also an amazing intro level deck builder. So if you have people new to the hobby, this is a great game, especially if like a Harry Potter, to get people into playing board games, because really easy to teach and fun. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And like each year, it doesn't take long to get through it. And that's what's really fantastic about it. You can get through, if you have an evening that you want to, play games with somebody, you can get through, 3 or 4 years, in a couple hours. And it's a good way to hook people into the hobby.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great game. How about you, Dan?
All right. The first thing I'm going to mention in terms of good implementations IP is not a specific game. I'm going to mention a publishing or developer studio, I guess would be the best way to put it. So Prospero Hall has put out quite a number of games that I have tried a small handful of them. Among their catalog includes like the Jaws board game, the board game that's about Universal monsters, Disney's Villainous. They also did the Funkoverse strategy game, which is sort of like a miniatures light, except using little Funko Pops with your favorite. I mean, it's literally mix and match IPs at that point. So despite the fact that they've done very, very popular IPs, and their games are primarily found in the mass market. Like I was in Target actually earlier today, and I found no less than 4 of their titles sitting on the shelf.
It's definitely a mass market forward setup, but yeah.
Yeah, but despite that fact, they have put together some really good designs and are definitely worthy of taking note of.
Yeah, the Jaws one was really cool because for a mass market game, there's a lot of strategy to it. And I do like when the board, like not the board flips, but when the thing flips and you try to take out Jaws and Jaws try to take you out in the second half.
Yeah, really cool. That game in particular has a really interesting bit to it because like it basically takes place in 2 acts, and like so like the way the first act ends determines which team has the advantage in the second act, Jaws or the human players, the people playing as the main characters from the film. So yeah, that's certainly interesting and different.
The Funkoverse one, I believe that Funko took it, so they don't publish it from Prospero Hall anymore. I'm pretty sure that's true.
My understanding is that Prospero Hall became the Funko Games division.
Could have been, yeah. Either way, Funko directly prints one way or another the Funko stuff, but the Funko universe stuff, I have the Jurassic Park one over there, is a pretty cool light combat game. So if you think like Unmatched or whatnot, it's in the same vein or same idea, and it's really accessible, and you get these big-headed Funkos, and you can fight with the Golden Girls.
I love though that you mentioned the Prospero Hall, because again, part of my research for this episode was I wanted like, okay, what are some of the IP games that I've seen that I want to play?
Okay.
And most of them are for Prospero Hall actually, because like I want to play that Jaws game. Just having seen a real play of it on YouTube and reading a little bit about it, I was like, I want to play. It might be a one-time game. I don't know. Like I might play it once.
I don't think it's a lot of replayability.
Right. I might play it once, but I really want to play it. And then the newest, one of the newer ones that they just brought out this year that I really want to play is one of my all-time favorite movies. And it's Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock.
I haven't seen that one yet.
And so,
yeah,
I love that movie. And it's a deduction style game that's very, it's a mystery in and of itself kind of movie. So I'm looking forward to getting a chance at one point to play that one. So I'm glad that Dan mentioned Prospero Hall. So.
Yeah, I think
I will
also,
gladly play that with you anytime, Peter, because I love that movie also
Okay,
so
fantastic.
Absolutely, I will play that. I love that. I will 100% play that.
much.
Fantastic.
Side note,
Look at this.
not
Love it.
the Johnny Depp Rear Window, the original Rear Window, so much better. Just saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
blasphemy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think they also came out with Bob Ross, the Bob Ross game.
I saw that.
That game is good, actually.
Is it? Okay.
Very good. It's a pretty good like set collection style game that I liked a lot. I ended up buying it for a company party, and the guy that won it, because we did one of those horrible white elephant things. We got to play it, and I really liked it. It was a good game.
And one of the ones that Dan mentioned with that one, I just gave my copy to the board game library was Villainous. So what they did with the basically Disney, Marvel, and now Star Wars IP to put that into a very accessible, easy to learn game that was really well implemented. Fantastic. Because of those three, IPs, most people are going to like one of them or a portion of that. So you're going to find something you're going to like and want to play with, and how each person is asymmetrical to everyone else. So your objectives are completely different, but the mechanics are the same. So it works easy to teach. And it's such a great gateway game. It's one of the reasons I gave it to our game library, because it's such a very good entry-level game to get people into the hobby. It's better served there than sitting on my shelf.
Yeah, and I really like how super asymmetric each of the players are, and with completely different goals that you have to complete. I have a feeling that game is going to be borrowed a lot during SibCon, which is the convention coming up. I have a copy over there. Well, I actually don't have a copy. It belongs to one of my daughters, and we've played it a couple times. It's a lot of fun.
Way to take over the whole conversation, Dan, just by mentioning Prospero Hall. Good job.
Prospero Hall. Well, I mean,
I've not said as half as much as all you guys have said combined.
I know. I love it.
Their airplane game is really, really good too. What is that one called? It's one of the airplane manufacturers. Anyway, it's really good. So if you see it in there, it's a good game. But yeah. So before we go into a rabbit hole further, Nathan.
Yeah. So I'm going to mention another publisher that does a lot of IPs and does them really well. Gale Force 9.
Nah.
Well, they did the Dune game.
They
Which
did
was
the
great.
Dune game.
I love that you guys decided
Dune was
not to
great.
talk about individual games anymore. It's like, let's just talk about
Let's talk about a publisher.
It's all the games that they make.
We're
I'll
going to
get
talk
into
about
a-
all the games at once.
I am getting to a
Okay.
specific game, but I just wanted to mention Gale Force 9 generally does a really good job at IP, and they tend to always focus on doing IP games.
Except for the Firefly one. Blech.
I'm going to hurt you because that is, I think, the best use of IP in games.
I knew you were going to say that, so I threw it out there. Like, yeah, except for the Firefly one. Boulder Dash. Go
So
ahead.
if you look at it objectively and just look at the mechanics of the game, it's a good game, but there's definitely games that have done better. It's
Outer
basically you are traveling around the verse and you're misbehaving. You're basically you're trading and you're doing jobs and things. Star Wars Outer Rim is a good example of, I think mechanically that's a better game. And Zaya, I think mechanically is a better game. But Firefly, the IP just works so well with that. And even though this is a slightly slow game, I've never had a game of this where after a couple minutes, people aren't just like completely engrossed in the theme and looking for specific characters and, getting really excited to, I gotta watch. It's like, and, there's a certain point in the game when it's like, you're maybe a half hour in, maybe even an hour in. And
Try two. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's like, it feels like 15 for one, but then suddenly everybody starts realizing, oh, we completely forgot that we're supposed to be going for this objective. We've just been playing the theme and playing with all the characters and getting so into misbehaving that, oh yeah, we need to actually start trying to win the game.
That's one of the 4-hour games I never got, like, because I like Firefly, but I'm not crazy about Firefly. But when I play it and you have all the expansions and I can see everyone getting lost in the game, and then like 3/4 of the way through, they're like, what do we have to do to win?
Well, it's supposed to be a 90-minute game. And if you are focused and actually doing the objectives, well, depending on the scenario, but for the base scenario, it's 90 minutes. And if you're focused, you will do it in 90 minutes. But nobody does it in 90 minutes.
You don't want to be focused in this game. You want to live in the verse, and you're getting an opportunity to.
Yeah.
So good.
I love this game. And I wouldn't love it nearly as much if it had any other IP or any other theme.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I agree. I knew you were going to talk about that one, so I had to throw that in.
Firefly is such a hard IP just because it has such a following, because it's good, but it has that incomplete factor. So I think that's what draws a lot of people to a game like with that theme, because I want to expand on this universe more.
Yeah, I think that game actually seems like it has more content than the actual films series plus the movies have.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it has the strength of the people who are into Firefly are generally really into Firefly. So you have a lot of characters in this game, especially if you get all the expansion, that showed up in the series for 2 to 3 seconds, and people know who those characters are.
Yeah.
So that's why it feels like there's so much content, because like these little like half-second characters show up, and oh yeah, it feels like more added content.
Curse you for your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Well done, Nathan.
I don't have any little dinosaurs.
It was on my list too, so now I don't have to mention it and bother James again.
So my number one game. I wonder what you think my number one game is.
I think I might know. It might be the one that I was going to mention next.
We'll see. My number one game, period, for the best implementation of an IP in a board game is, what do you think it is, Nathan?
Did I just mention it?
No.
It's not Outer Rim?
Nope.
Manchester Madness?
Nope.
Don't know.
It is Star Wars.
Wars Rebellion.
Star Wars Rebellion
Star Wars
is
Rebellion.
hands down the greatest implementation of an IP in a game, period. When I'm playing Star Wars Rebellion, I feel like I'm in Star Wars. I am either the Empire or the Rebellion. And I feel the stress of running the Empire or Rebellion. When I'm the Empire, I'm like, where the heck are these rebels? Oh my gosh, they are bothering the crap out of me. Will they just die? And when I'm the Rebellion, I'm like, there's a Death Star outside my planet. Oh my God. Sweat beating down my face. It is an amazingly tense, awesome game. And you're playing through the only first 3 episodes of Star Wars. So for you non-millennials, that is 4, 5, and 6. That's the first 3. And I really like the fact that they added in an expansion that included Rogue One. I really like that one. It was a nice movie. I think one of the only sad ending movies in Star Wars that I know of. So no spoilers. I guess that is a spoiler. Yeah, it was a sad movie. But anyway, really, really love that game. I just like, it is just perfect how they implemented the Star Wars theme into the game in every single level. So that was my number one IP implementation of a game.
That's definitely a game you can't put a different IP on and make it functional without changing the core mechanics of the game. You just can't do it.
Built on Star Wars. I was like, everything is built with that. Yeah.
It absolutely is episode 4, 5, and 6 in a game. And it handles everything about those, like the grand, all of Star Wars operations of destroying planets and Death Stars and space battles, but also putting the characters in and having them do operations among themselves and capturing like Princess Leia and doing all this is like the forefront also with it. So it's everything about Star Wars in a game that you spend 4 hours playing and you enjoy every minute of it.
Yep.
This one is number one on my IP I want to play games.
So sad you haven't played it yet.
I know.
So sad.
You own it and you haven't invited me over to play it yet.
I know.
James has many games that he's promised to play with us, and he hasn't invited us over.
We have played this on the channel before, but I think we played it a bit wrong.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because they changed the combat rules from the original edition of Star Wars Rebellion for some of the reprints, but they're in the expansion rules. So it gets confusing on combat, on which rules to go with and what stuff. And there's like little things, but yeah. And I don't think I've ever played it with the advanced rules yet, ever. And I'm super excited to get to a point to where I can. The advanced rules, you put into effect the cards abilities instead of just flip a card and you get that character. So a lot more powerful turns in the advanced game and a lot more thematic powerful turns. Even the base game is like ultra thematic. Playing the advanced version is just like stratosphere thematic. So
I've actually played it with the advanced rules and it's cool, but yeah, you want to play it a bunch of times before you get into those. And and you know, it does add a little bit of complexity. It definitely lengthens the game a little bit, but not too much. It's definitely a lot of fun. But this is a fantasy flight game, so yeah, the rules tend to be a little bit confusing.
So, Peter, do you have another one you wanted to mention?
I do. So the other one is probably, I'm not sure if I'm willing to say it is my number one favorite, but it's really high up there. I know. Okay. Is Dune. Just Dune. So I've only played.
You said do.
I know, Dune. I've only played the 2019 re-release of Dune. I know that originally, I think 1970 something or other, the game came out and then was out of print forever. But in 2019, it was re-released. And for me, this one is one of the, if not the best, one of the best IP games, because you're choosing to play as one of the factions, one of the houses in the Dune universe. And each one of these factions has asymmetrical powers that lean super heavy into that family's or that faction's abilities in the series. You know, if you're going to be playing as the Harkonnens, you are going to be backstabbing the crud out of everybody. And you have abilities that allow that to happen. You also have like way more cards than other people get. And when you play them, you feel like you are super powerful and everybody else feels like there's just no way we can beat them. If you're playing as the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, then you have the ability to like choose who's going to win and in which round, you guess, and
cheat.
And then you
cheat the rest of the game to make sure that happens.
The whole game to make sure that happens, and if it happens, they don't win, you do. There's just so many cool aspects to each one of these asymmetrical, because I've played games that your faction has asymmetrical powers before, but this is the only one where it's built on an IP and it makes perfect sense why you have those powers. And so having, read the books or whatever, watched the movies, but knowing that world and seeing them so lovingly design each one of these factions with their powers, asymmetrical powers in mind. And then just the fact that, again, what is the whole point of in the story is like you want to own the planet. And so what is your goal in the game? Own the planet. You have to have the most of these like places that your faction or you and your allied faction own, and that's how you win the game. But the combat mechanics thrown on top of that, I think, are super fun. There's hidden information thrown in, there's cards that are added in, there's the fact that you might blow up a shield wall and just destroy everybody and their brother, which is just hilarious, and it's awesome. So this is one for me that I've played it. I know the IP pretty well. I mean, I'm not a fanatic for the series, but I enjoy it. But just playing this game, you just get lost in the world, and it's a lot of fun. So that's going to be, and again, there's another Dune one out there that I absolutely love, but this one does the IP more justice, I think.
Did you play with the expansions?
I have the expansions. I have not played with them yet. The expansions add just more factions.
Yep.
So it's not like it changes the mechanics of the game heavily.
Just the dynamics.
Just the dynamics. What faction are you going to choose? I have them. I'm just going to go out there, and having not played with the expansions, I don't think they're necessary, because the factions that you get in the core game are they're already the core factions of the series anyways. But adding in the other ones could be fun to play with, just to see how they interact with the other ones. But I haven't had a chance yet, because this is a game that is, I think, 3 to 6 player, and if you're not playing with 6 player, you're playing it wrong.
Yeah, it's definitely a max player count game.
You want to have all of these factions going against each other, because that's where it really that's where the fun lies. I've played it with 3 players. It's fine. It's okay. It is phenomenal with all 6 players.
I literally think they balanced it for all 6 players, period.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you play anything else with that, it feels wonky. It feels like something's wrong.
It feels very, very wonky without all 6. You might get away with 5, but you really want 6.
Yeah, you want 6. I almost think, like, if you have 6 players, play Dune.
Yeah.
If you don't have 6 players, play something else.
If you're going to have all 6 people come into your house, this is the game you choose to play.
Right. It is that awesome.
So that's me. That's my second one. So
how about you, Evan?
So
Evan.
The one that I'm going to mention, it actually fits into the same category like Peter says, and it's a game that if you have 6 players, it is a game that you would want to play. So it is a Game of Thrones, the board game. So overall, the game mechanics aren't super spectacular. So you're playing on the map of Westeros. You're vying for the Iron Throne, and if you've read the books, if you watch the show, you have an idea of what's going on. There's no dice rolling into the game, so armies have set values for that, and basically whenever you get into battles, the highest value wins. The key thing that works with the game, and it works really well with the IP, is everything that you're doing. There's 3 phases in the game, and the first phase, you're assigning actions to all of your units, and it's all hidden from everyone. So with the amount of backstabbing and sneaky things that happen throughout that entire franchise, it implements so well into a hidden movement, into bluffing, into negotiation style game that this game does. That's really, it plays great because of that. So if you're a fan of that IP, this works so well, I think.
I will say, it's like they said, okay, I really love diplomacy, but I've killed all my friends. So how could I make diplomacy into a game where I just want to bludgeon them instead of murder them by the time the game is done? Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Well, since you mentioned Game of Thrones, I feel like I should ask, are you planning to actually watch the House of Dragons?
That would require me having a subscription to HBO.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth it. Anyway, so if you like that stuff, great. But Dan, what do you got?
Okay, because I enjoy controversy, I'm going to throw some pseudo examples in your guys' direction. So, how do you guys feel about games that obviously have IPs attached to them, but don't actually have IPs attached to them?
Evan,
So,
attack Evan. Attack.
As an example, I am
Cover
going
me
to use
timbers.
out of my own collection a game called Dinosaur Island, who obviously wants to be Jurassic Park, but isn't. And is probably a better implementation of Jurassic Park than any actual Jurassic Park game. Nemesis comes to mind as another good one,
Yeah,
right?
Nemesis is a great example.
So do we want to call these IP games or not?
I think so, because they're just basically a fan who wanted to design a game based on a certain IP, and they couldn't get the intellectual properties for either one reason or another. They belong to someone else, where like they literally sell the board game rights to company X. They can't get them, or they can't afford them, but they love the IP so much that they would like to put something forward that is in the same idea. So yeah.
I would say yes also, because if you take Nemesis, and if I were to ask you to describe Nemesis in a sentence, how would you describe it?
I just do one word: aliens.
Aliens.
I don't even need a sentence. I'll be like, aliens. I mean, literally, they don't need to change anything in the game to be aliens. Like, they would just change the title and the whatever they call the monsters to xenomorphs. That's it. Like, literally aliens. Like, two word changes.
The alien miniatures in Nemesis are very like Geiger-esque. They use like that kind of same art style.
Yeah, I would just call these IP inspired games. I mean,
I do know that, you know, sometimes somebody makes a game and it's a cool game and they're like, they try to get the IP but fail. I know this happened with, oh man, it's an older title. Was it I'm sorry, the multiplayer ship versus ship game where like each player is basically has to run a mini game to run one system of the ship.
Captain Sonar?
No, it's like something dice, because you're rolling. No, I'm sorry. There was a variant that was dice duels.
Space Cadets.
Yeah. Space Cadets. The designer
the captain is dead.
The designer looked into getting the Star Trek IP for Space Cadets, and they couldn't, given the budget / scope of their project. So they just put it out of Space Cadets and let people play it that way, which is fine.
Yeah, I think that's a lot better than the alternative, which some companies do. Is like, okay, they build it with a theme in mind, a IP in mind. They fail to get that IP, so they just completely retheme it, and the new theme doesn't work at all. So I'd much rather have it like IP inspired than like retheme and break it.
So I'll let you guys name some games, but before you do, I'll mention two more out of my collection. So of course, one of my favorites is Fortune and Glory. I've described this game as Indiana Jones in a box. What else do I need to say about it? And the game Tiny Epic Quest has a very Zelda feel to it.
Oh, it's Zelda. It is Zelda.
Very Zelda.
I like Tiny Epic Quest. I think mechanically it's a great game. That's another game with a follow mechanic that's nice. How about you, Nathan?
So I mean, kind of going off of what Dan said, is a lot of the Cthulhu games are kind of getting into that too, because, you know, the Lovecraft theme is being, you know, an open IP now, has gotten watered down a lot. And so you get games that are based on Lovecraft, then games are based on the games that are based on Lovecraft. Games are based on just the concept of Cthulhu. So it's definitely like the theme is sometimes based on Lovecraft, sometimes just the general concepts. But my favorite Cthulhu themed game would be Mansions of Madness, of course, which I mentioned briefly earlier, which is a great app-based game that's highly thematic, highly story-driven. You are going and exploring a map. you have different scenarios and different objectives. You might, in one game, you might be trying to solve a mystery, interrogating various people, and then suddenly the lights go out and the whole game changes. Or you might be trying to make it to one end of a train and just have a simple get from point A to B, and hopefully nothing bad happens on the way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that that is a thematic of a board game as a Mansions of Madness would actually work if it was strictly like the IP of Cthulhu or H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was, then when you died, there would be no ending. Like they would literally cut it off. It would just be like fade to black. They don't explain anything. You just died. Or maybe, who knows? It just ended. That's how he wrote. Like you filled in the rest with your mind. That's what was scary. So I do like the fact that they finish off the story like, no, you died horribly at the end and were eaten and then regurgitated and eaten again. I'm like, oh, okay, that was bad. Let's try not to do that next time. But yeah, there's so much H.P. Lovecraft out there because it's all public domain. So
Yeah, I mean, that comes from the old concept of, oh, there's nothing scarier than your own imagination, which to some degree is true, but some people have scarier imaginations than other people.
yeah, mine's not very imaginative. Like he'd be dead. Be dead. That's it. He died. He's dead. Don't matter. Not alive. I'm actually starting for mine. I'm actually starting to love Death May Die a lot. Death May Die is an amazing action-based Call of Cthulhu themed game. It's just unrealistic in any way you can imagine. You just go in and try to punch to death Cthulhu, and most of the time doesn't do too well for you. But every once in a while, you have a weird thing where you win, like we did on our playthrough. Spoilers.
Who doesn't like punching Cthulhu in the face?
In the face with fire everywhere. Like we're on fire punching them. Like, yeah, we're gonna win. It's good. So yeah, it's I mean, there's a lot of other IP games that I like a lot. Those are pretty much my major ones. Does anyone else have any ones they want to throw out there that they were just like, oh man, perfect?
So I want to bring up a topic as opposed to a game. So and it was what I said earlier, talking about the IP in the not so great games such as like Chutes and Ladders or stuff like that. So I feel, and this may be controversial, it does have a place for those style of games. So like my youngest son has a Spider-Man Chutes and Ladders that he absolutely loves. My oldest has a Harry Potter Clue. He's on the spectrum, so one of his focuses is Harry Potter. So getting him a Harry Potter anything he loves. And that's actually not a bad implementation of Clue. It just puts a little of the theme into it, but it actually makes it a little more playable. And then you have the many incarnations of Risk in the different IPs. So are any of those games fantastic games? Absolutely not. That by no means. But does it have a place? Yes, because if I'm going to play Chutes and Ladders with got it when he was 4, I'd rather play something that has Spider-Man in it versus just the play Jane Chutes and Ladders. If I'm going to play Clue, I might as well use it as an IP or have it in an IP that I find enjoyable. I will say Risk actually does a very good job with the IPs because I hate the basic Risk board because it just turns into who gets Australia, let's build up and then break out strategy. And by putting it into the different worlds or whatever's makes the game a little bit better to play, I think. But that's my thoughts on like those style of games. I think the IP doesn't do a great job at it, but it actually makes the games a little more palatable for people to play. And if it's doing that, is it not kind of doing its job?
That's a fair enough point.
I was gonna say, I think that's a good argument. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
not
gonna have to agree.
making me personally want to go out and play those games. But like you said, for somebody who ends up, that's a game that somebody wants to play, it would definitely make it more enjoyable with the IP on it. So I have been convinced by your argument that it has a place,
especially if it has good art.
especially if
And
it has good art.
like using the Spider-Man shoots and ladders, like it gets my young child asking me, well, who's this bad guy, or who's this bad guy? And that just makes my nerd heart, happy. And then I can
when you get a
eventually
different game like anything else, you can burn it.
but it plants the seeds that I can eventually turn him loose onto Dan's shop and make him spend lots and lots of money on buying lots of things at our friendly local gaming stores.
I honestly think you need to try Marvel United. Marvel United is not nearly as complicated as it seems. It's a very straightforward rules light game even. He might need a couple more years on him to really get into it, but if he likes Marvel, he's going to probably love it.
So part of
as someone who's in a store that enjoys comic related IP specifically, I certainly will not shy away from buying games that have IP on them for my shelf. And I kind of specifically pay attention to IPs that have crossovers with existing comic books because of our clientele. It's like, oh, there's Marvel on that box. I don't know what that thing is, but like maybe I should look into it more. This is My Little Pony. I need to take a closer look at that. Oh, this is Transformers. I definitely need to get that for the shelf. I
think you still have the Transfer card game there, don't you?
I'm sorry, Renegade Game Studios recently came out with a selection of deck building games. One for Transformers, one for G.I. Joe. The My Little Pony one just came out. So yeah, they're really hitting it.
There was a TCG though, it was Transformers. I don't think it did very well. It had big cards.
Oh yeah. There was a collectible card game at one point that was actually being produced by WotC. So I was getting like promos and free product for it. Yeah, that's now defunct.
Yeah. I don't know. I think COVID killed it, but I don't think it was doing very well before that anyway.
So I did think of a good example of going back to bad uses of IP in games, and a type of bad use that we haven't talked about yet. And that example is Pillars of the Earth, which is actually a good, solid game that I really do enjoy, but it wasn't that successful when it first came out, and it didn't get republished for a long time. And I believe a big part of that was because of the expense of the IP attached, which was, I would argue, was not entirely necessary and didn't add a whole lot to the game. That being who wrote that? I don't even remember who wrote Pillars of the Earth.
Foley.
Yeah. Which is a good book, but it wasn't really necessary to be attached to this game. And I think the game would have been much better, much more successful without the IP, because they could have produced a lot more and reprinted much more easily.
That does bring up like a certain danger to like releasing a game that has an IP, because like you release a brand new game, new mechanical systems, or that's got something cool going on in it, but it's attached to an IP that's like maybe not the best. Maybe it's a flash in the pan IP that's nobody's gonna remember in 3 years from now, right? Then the game's gonna suffer because of that, right?
Or even worse, the IP goes into contention, and there's like, it becomes unclear who owns the IP.
No, I think that's semi happened with Dune. I don't remember what the Dune board game. They couldn't reprint anything Dune.
The family held the rights for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they refused to give out the rights to pretty much anybody for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, either way, now there's like Dune everything. So, yeah. Pillars of Earth. I like the board game and I like the book. I just don't think in the Venn diagram of people that play board games, there's a lot of Pillars of Earth fans that are crazy that play board games. But I could be wrong. I mean, it was a popular book series. So
Well, and I think a big part of that is just it was not widely available for very long because
it had a small print run. It did. And
Yeah.
even in the reprints, it was a small print run too.
they eventually reprinted it many years later.
It's a good worker placement game with a really neat turn mechanic.
Yep.
But, yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. So are we ready for me to punish you guys? All right. So this is how it's going to work. What you're going to do is you're going to tell me what you think would be your most favored IP that you want to see in a board game. And then I'm going to punish you later. So, and to be fair, once I've punished all four of you, Peter will get to punish me on mine. And he'll know what's going to happen by the time it gets to me.
I hope so.
So you will know,
I'll
but
try
I don't
not
want
to
to say
fail
it
you.
yet.
Okay.
So, Peter, what would be an IP that you would love to see, or even if it's already in a game, but you would like to see properly implemented in a board game?
I would. You can see it right here.
Oh, yes.
I would
All
love to
right.
see somebody somehow create a good Wheel of Time game. They've tried a few different times in the past, but every single video game, card game, any kind of game based off of this series has been terrible. So I would love to see somebody create a fantastic Wheel of Time game.
What? The video game was horrible? Fireball, 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 fireball. That's all you did. Like the whole game. It didn't make any sense.
I'm just glad that it came out at a time that I would not have ever played it. So I've only seen video and hear people talk about it. So, but yeah, I would love to have a great Wheel of Time game.
Even the RPG was considered like epically horrible.
Oh, so bad. So bad.
So, yeah, so yours is Wheel of Time. How about you, Evan?
So mine is going to be one of my absolute favorite science fiction shows ever, Babylon 5. So absolutely love that. Every few years I do a rewatch of all the seasons of it. Early to mid 90s. So it didn't get a lot of IP out there. They had a miniature fleet-based game which played really cool, but it had a card game which I still have somewhere. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. Yeah. They did come out with a space sim fighter game that was 95% complete, and then the cord was cut on it, so it never made it anywhere. There was an RPG that was but it was in that 90s era that there was a ton of stuff coming out that was absolute garbage. So it just nothing it's really.
D6 system, I think it was not.
Yeah. And it got a little bit of a reprint in the early 2000s. Mongoose Publishing was buying up like every IP possible at that point, and they didn't do a great job with that, any of them other than Paranoia. But that would be something that I would love to see getting a good IP game of some sort, which is very possible because the original writer is putting a new series of Babylon 5 out on the CW coming next year. So we'll see.
Babylon 5 is like Deep Space Nine fixed.
It's better than Deep Space Nine.
I just said it's like fixed. Like it's the fixed version of Deep Space Nine. What Deep Space Nine could have been. But yeah, so Babylon 5. All right, Dan.
Oh boy. I'm gonna go obscure, of course. So I would there's been some video games that have actually touched on this IP, but none of them have really done like have been very, very close to the source material. So I'm going to go with a novel, and the novel is called the Water Margin, also known as Outlaws of the Marsh. This is like a classic piece of Chinese literature. Actually, it was written in like the 1400s. But it's all about these bandits doing bandit things on the mountain for the first half of the book, anyways.
That was the water margin.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds really cool. All right, Nathan.
Well, it's kind of funny that Peter mentioned Rear Window earlier in this episode, because I've been thinking a lot about like classic cinema and IPs related to classic cinema. And I would love to see Seven Samurais made into a board game. And if you're not familiar with Seven Samurais, it's a theme that's been recycled a lot in a lot of movies. It's also known sometimes as the Magnificent Seven. And it's the idea of these seven samurais are basically hired by the small village to help teach them how to defend themselves from this group of bandits. So they're training the civilians, they're building up physical defenses, and then they're basically deploying themselves as well as the villagers to do this final epic battle at the end of the movie against 40 bandits. So it's like massively outnumbered and trying to survive.
Yep. All right. So mine, I talked about it earlier, is based on a book series by Brandon Sanderson. It's actually my favorite book series ever written. I think it was one of the best written book series to date. Before that, I really liked Wheel of Time. I still like Wheel of Time. It's an amazing series. But Stormlight Archive is hands down my favorite series, and I will go nuts if someone made a board game, miniature game, anything that was good off of it. Now, I know that Brotherwise Games is coming out with a miniature set. I'm backing that, and they're going to make a game based on it. So maybe that'll happen in the future, but I also like to see a board game based on it. If you haven't read Stormlight Archive, I 100% recommend reading it.
Don't let James
amazing.
fool you, though. This is not a completed series yet.
Well, technically, book 1 through 3.
Okay. Yeah, technically, he's not done yet. There's like going to be 10 books, and there's only 4 books so far. So
yeah, so I think 4, 5, and 6, which 5 is not out yet. I think 4, 5, and 6 has an arc.
Right, exactly.
But yeah,
but they are. I'm not knocking it. You want to read them? They're fantastic.
Yeah, I would suggest that if you want to read and not have to wait 2 years for them to finish a book, read 1 through 3. You could also read some of the novelettes. Those are fine too. But if you want to have an end, don't start 5 or 4. And 5 won't be out until 2024 now. So also they have a really good Mistborn series. I really love that one, but there's plenty of games on that. So Brandon Sanderson, greatest author on the face of the planet. Sort of like Eric M. Lang, the greatest designer on the face. Boom, he got in. Almost forgot.
Someone pushed the button.
Someone pushed the button. All right. So this is very
somebody hit the bell.
So for this game is actually going to be a peer decision on who did the best. I am going to take your favorite thing. So Peter has all the way back to me to decide because he's going to go first. And you're going to have to convince us that your retheming of the game that I mentioned is done best with your IP of choice. And you're going to have 60 seconds to do it. So basically, again, so as an example, I would say, you could say Transformers was your favorite IP that you want to see made into a great game. And I'll say, sorry. And you have to get, in 60 seconds, you have to tell me how you're going to perfectly implement that IP into that and convince us that that is awesome. So,
James, I don't like you.
These are not nice. All right, so the first one is going to be Peter. And I'm going to explain the game that you're going to have to go off with a little bit, so you got a little bit of time before your 60 seconds starts.
Okay.
So your first one, your IP is Wheel of Time. And what you're going to have to do is tell me how you're going to implement that theme perfectly into a wonderful entry-level tile placement game where you need to complete castles, you need to complete roads to gain points, and you need to put your farmers down to get points for all the castles that they touch. And I am speaking of Carcassonne. So you're going to be retheming Carcassonne to be the Wheel of Time. So get ready, get set, go.
Oh gosh, you suck. Okay, so let's see. I'm running out of time really fast. So there's a lot of traveling that happens in the books. So I would say that it obviously you can redo the art so that it fits the Wheel of Time, like the map kind of thing. So that's easy. That's sold there. And then I would say that you're going to choose that you want to have. You're going to want to have. So the different kind of casters, the male casters have the ability. No, I see. I'm screwing this up. I'm going to do terrible. No. That's why I'm not a board game designer, people. I just play games.
I'll give you 60 more seconds.
No. Like I got
Just say,
nothing.
James, you suck.
You got
60
nothing.
for 60 seconds.
All right,
No.
all right.
This is not no.
You're like, no.
No, but now I'm gonna have a fun time waiting to come up with a game that you have to do yours for. So
Oh no, yeah, it's gonna be good. I can't wait to see
failed
what that's
epically.
gonna be. But that's okay. That's okay. So the next one is gonna be so these are all based on things that you said. So I'm hopefully determining that you screwed yourself and not like totally gonna kill me in the back alley of anywhere, but you know. So the game that Evan's going to have to theme Babylon 5 off of and convince us that is the best theming of that game is going to be a children's game where you need to roll dice and you need to go up ladders throughout the board to try to get up to, I think, number 99, but you don't want to land on a snake because you'll slide all the way back down. So his game is Chutes and Ladders, and he needs to explain how he's going to retheme Chutes and Ladders to work with Babylon 5. And it's going to be a great implementation of that IP. So get ready, get set. Go ahead, Evan.
James, you suck. James, you suck. James, you suck. James, you suck. So you would have the board out there with the various chutes and ladders, but instead of chutes and ladders, you would have an elevator that would go up, and you would have secret passages that would slide you down. And you would be able to implement the various characters throughout the series as your pawns to play, such as Delenn and Jakar and Londo. And that's really all you can do because it shoots and ladders, James. It shoots and ladders. You were a terrible person. Is my 60 seconds up?
No, you still got more time. You could be like those bird people that, you know, you can't cut them because the air comes out and their soul gets escaped. So
here we go. So, oh, what are you doing? Oh, James is making me do terrible things. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna probably be a lot easier to. Man, I'm dying. I'm gonna be a lot easier to Dan. So Dan might actually win this whole thing because it's gonna be an easy one. But it's not gonna be as easy because this will be a silver bordered magic card. So this is gonna be a special limited edition run of the water margin. How would you implement that properly into a way that people would want to get this, first off, and second off, it's playable. So your 60 seconds will start now. You're muted. You're still muted. You're still muted.
Are we thinking one card, a small set of cards, or a large set of cards?
You just have to convince us.
Okay. All right.
So ready, steady, go.
So if you look at history of Magic the Gathering, there's already been a set that used a Chinese novel as its precedent, which was Portal 3 Kingdoms. Portal 3 Kingdoms was sort of a mixed bag because it was Portal, so it was a dumbed down version of the game it didn't go over too well. But if I were to do the Water March and Outlaws of the March as a set of Magic cards, I think it would work because like there's lots of interesting characters that have unique moments in the story, and you can turn these moments into instants and sorceries, and you can turn these characters into legendary creatures, and these characters sort of like have relationships as well. And there's even like the second half of the book is like a giant conflict between the bandits who have now like turned over a new leaf and is working for the emperor, suppressing a rebellion in a foreign territory. I'm sorry, am I done?
Yep, you're all done. So that was
Okay.
probably the best one so far, but that was a little bit of a softball. So Nathan's is not a softball. So we should take that into account when you're voting for how people do on it, because how difficult they are. But Nathan wanted to have Seven Samurais, which is an amazing IP. And he needs to retheme No Thanks. In No Thanks, I believe you have 48 cards and you take 9 of them out at the beginning of the round, and it's an anti-trick taking game. You have chips in the game that you start out with a certain number based on player count, and you can pass by placing a chip on one of those cards. Eventually, if you either run out of chips or you decide to take a card, you will get the card and put it in your play area. The chips are negative points at the end of the round. You want to have the lowest score. But any cards that you have are positive points, which are bad. However, if you do runs, the lowest number on a run is what the points that you take. So you're trying to get runs too. And it's a little bit of bullying throughout the game and trying to push your luck to get more of those chips and stuff. But that is No Thanks. So Nathan, your time starts now.
I swear you were going to make me do Catan, but but okay. So for No Thanks, the various cards will represent the bandits. So you have up to 40 bandits. So 1 through 40, and you are bidding villagers to try to say whether I want to try to fight these bandits. And you have obviously a limited number of villagers. And if you ever run out of villagers, obviously you might end up having to take on a large number of bandits that you don't want to take on. So at the end of the game, you're going to be counting up how many bandits you managed to take on. You ended up taking on, and you subtracting the number of villagers you have left, and your total points is basically your losses. How much higher the number of bandits you have to face versus the villagers you have left. You can add into that with your actual samurais by having a special token that can be used once per game to throw away a card. So if you use one of your samurais, you can just say, I don't want that 40 that I just got. It's gone. It's out of the game.
Up. All right. I like that one. That was pretty good. I like that. That actually worked into a game that I didn't think you could figure out how to do. All right. So mine was Stormlight Archive, which is a series by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah. Peter is going to briefly explain the game that I need to retheme with this IP.
And yeah, briefly.
Oh, wait. Before you start.
Oh, okay.
Does someone have a stopwatch that they can run? So I'm not looking down.
Somebody else doing it?
I'm getting in here.
And just started as soon as I start talking. That's basically what I did.
Okay. This is going to be probably a little bit of a softball.
Okay.
But I'm only doing it just to be mean. And that is because I want James to make the latest edition of Monopoly.
I knew that was going to
Stormlight Archives.
No. Okay. All right.
Just because I want to see you cry a little bit when you're done and how you sell it so well.
All right. So the Monopoly edition of Stormlight Archive would be amazing, because basically what you do, I would actually base it on the Shattered Plains. So basically what it would be doing is you would try to be collecting your set of houses by controlling different portions of the Shattered Plains. So you would try to be getting like the east, west, north, and south portions on there. And these would be where you would have to spend troops as your money to defeat the Prishna, which are the people that are in the area, to be able to get your soul gems. So you would get soul gems and you would place them as your properties on each of these locations. And then when someone else ended there, you were allowed to tax them because they need to use your soul gem to be able to pull the stormlight out of it to make timbers, to make wood, to make food, to power their armies and so forth. So basically your economy in this version of Monopoly will be your armies, and the lands that you're trying to take will have different varying numbers of prissioning on there. And if you want to build it up, you have to fight those again. So you're gonna have to spend more troops to be able to put more soul gems on there, which will make it cost more when people land on there. And different areas of the Shattered Plain are worth more because especially when you get towards the center where they actually have their house, that's going to be your boardwalk. So where they live is your goal because you're trying to eliminate them. And that is my retheming of Monopoly based on Stormlight Archive.
Okay, did he do that within 60 seconds?
No, that was a minute and a half.
What? You're supposed to
You're
stop
supposed
me.
to cut him off.
I thought somebody else was doing the time. I also didn't know how much time it was.
I got a whole
That's
minute
what
and a half.
you said you were pulling it up, so I was letting you do it. Okay, so you got more time than everybody else, but at the
So you
same
have to take that
time,
into account.
James, you did so good that now someone out there is going to make this
Make a
version of Monopoly, and you're gonna cry when you see it on the shelves.
I think that would be really cool.
Because you're gonna
if
have to
they-
buy
they
it
set
now.
up with the
You
Shattered
Yeah, you
Plain.
have to
realize
buy it. You
you're
have
gonna
to
have to
buy
buy it. Yeah.
I would actually even make like the trenches would be your railroads. So
James,
You're
is gonna
adding
ma-
to your
James
time,
is-
by the way.
James is going to make such a good version of Monopoly. He's going to want to own this game, and then it's just going to be forever a joke. It's going to be fantastic.
Which I do have a question here,
sure.
and I have to know, James, do you actually own a copy of Monopoly?
I don't think I do. I did for a little while. I had I definitely did for a bunch of different copies. But one of the ones that I semi liked for a little while is they made a Mario Kart version of Monopoly, and you race around the board, and you really literally just trying to get around the board more than you are to get
Monopoly
things.
Gamer. Yeah, I have it over there.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Wasn't great, but it wasn't
Okay,
bad.
so are we supposed to vote on something now?
Yeah, so basically we're all
Who did the best job?
professionals. So basically we'll go around the table, and I'll do Peter, Evan, Dan, and Nathan and myself, and then we'll vote on. You can't vote for yourself.
Obviously.
We'll vote for who you think, just say who you think did the best explaining their retheming of the IP. So Peter, who'd you like?
Nathan.
All right. Evan?
One, I don't think we're actually professionals. And two, Nathan.
Yeah. Dan?
I actually felt like the best implementation was Nathan's explanation as well.
So cool. Anyway, Nathan?
I
can't vote for
can't vote
yourself.
for myself, so I guess James.
Sure, why not?
And then mine is Nathan. So Nathan is pretty much the unanimous winner of this ridiculous game.
Thank you, James, for making me look like a complete buffoon. I appreciate it.
I was like, well, I know some people. are gonna be
Those were some really hard ones.
That was tough.
yeah, Chutes and Ladders. I was just like, Evan's screwed. I don't know what to do. Carcassonne.
If I was
if
somebody
you think
who could
about it a little
actually-
bit, you could probably get.
I probably could, but off the top of my head, no, I can't figure anything out. I'm not a quick thinker like that. So
It
All
helped
right.
that I already had a concept of how I would apply this IP. Just I was like, okay, could be almost like Castle Panic, but that's not really great. But but no,
Yeah,
I
yours
had
was-
some concepts of like how to apply it. to
Yours
other
was
games.
legitimately a thing that you could do. So
so
that was cool. So that was our discussion on IP in games. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. But you all have a good night.